So, hello everyone. Yeah, both of us are PMs. We work together, and the genesis of this, what we're trying to do is just we every day at lunch we have super interesting conversations about
Indeed.
different products, different problem statements in the product domain. Why don't we create a content series around it so that we can bring these discussions to the world, right? What it will help us do is get more structure around this thing. It will help us think deeper on these problem statements. It will help us do more research before recording these episodes and also spark good conversations with like-minded folks and create a small community wherein we can learn from each other's views. That's sort of the genesis, right? And very interestingly, Gaurav saw, or both of us saw a post on LinkedIn wherein a user had using AI created a Chrome extension which sort of overlaid on top of your existing Netflix screen and showed the IMDb ratings. And that sort of is the theme, overarching theme of this episode. Gaurav, do you want to add something to it?
No, actually, Vaibhav, that was a really interesting observation that we both of us had. And we were both curious why it had happened. As we go into the conversation, we found ourselves on the other side of the same conversation. It's like, this is making so much amount of sense. I was like, yo, it is not making sense. So we thought it's a great starter to have people who have different points on the same take. See how the conversation goes.
Awesome. So I've just created some pointers for us to be able to structure this conversation. We can take detours as we go along. First of all, what we want to do is just put up the problem statement, which is, would it make sense for Netflix to have have IMDb ratings intrinsic to its listings, right? Because we saw Amazon Prime does expose the IMDb ratings. So does it make sense for Netflix to have IMDb ratings or any sort of community ratings in it? So that's sort of the problem statement. We'll try to understand why it should have, does it make sense, what sort of problems it's trying to solve for different stakeholders. And then we'll segue into things like ratings, community ratings, overall, how different apps and different have tackled these problems of community ratings, the sort of shortcomings. And then we'll circle back to Netflix's problem statement of how Netflix has approached this. Can it do something differently? And maybe we can take a look at some metrics and think of an MVP if it's a problem worth solving. Yeah, what do you say, Gaurav?
Yeah, Vaibhav. So the first and the foremost thing that struck me during the conversation was it looks so obvious. A behemoth like Netflix, why is it not having IMDb? Because we have always looked at IMDb ratings and then we start consuming the content. Why would Netflix not? When I got deeper into it, I realized that one, from a business standpoint, IMDb actually one of those companies. It makes sense for Amazon to have an integration with IMDb rating from a license from a reliability perspective.
Correct.
But when it comes to Netflix, it takes a lot of pride in its own recommendation engine, which is 3% of the content being consumed. Back in 2017, during the research that we did, found that they had some rating system which they discarded.
Right.
They went to like thumbs up or thumbs down. I love this.
Yeah.
So started to think, why does Netflix still doesn't have it?
Yeah. So Netflix need not stick with IMDb since it's a Amazon company, right? Yeah. But it can have something like either a Rotten Tomatoes. So what we're talking about is community ratings. It may be sourced internally, wherein Netflix can create its own community rating systems, such as Amazon has done it, YouTube has done their own likes, etc. Right? It can have it sourced internally or externally. Right? But the problem we are really trying to see is should there be a need of a community rating, right? So for me as a user, every time I am trying to discover some content, and as you mentioned, if 80% of the content is through recommendation, it means that 80% of the content is discovery led and not intent led, right? And that's an interesting insight that you gave me. And if 80% of the content consumed is discovery led, then I think it's a good problem to solve, right? I, as a user, I find myself constantly looking at IMDb recommendations by Netflix, and I constantly am looking at the IMDb ratings and what people have said about it. And then I decide whether to watch it or not, right? So from a user perspective, I think the two problems it solves for me is, one is the amount of cognitive load that I have, it reduces to some extent. So the information gap that is present, which is necessary for me to make that decision. So information gap at the point of decision making is reduced, and the cognitive load is also reduced, right? And I think to some extent, it's also a proxy of how good the movie is or the amount of satisfaction I'm going to get after watching a particular show. So I think these three problems from a user perspective are really to be solved by a feature like this. What do you think, Gaurav?
So, Vaibhav, what happens is that when Netflix has its own recommendation engine that has been powered by the customer's viewing experience and the digital footprint that they leave on Netflix itself.
Right.
Correct. So, what they have not done is made it explicit,
Correct.
make it public for other people to understand that my preferences of watching a content, how
Right.
it's for them.
Correct.
Because they take pride in ensuring that their recommendation is super solid and the data being consumed. Now, that leaves another a pothole in the place where it says that you are living in the own content bubble.
Right.
I continue to watch the same sort of content I have always done. As a shown, the element of discovery of new variety of content is very limited. Now, this is a problem with a rating system. Now, with IMDb coming into the picture, what will be more interesting to know is that currently also I have a great collection of content over there, and different customer either they watch on the basis of their behavior on whatever Netflix has suggested, or they have some external information of ratings, and a good proxy to that to figure out is how much of the content being viewed on different personas, and get the thing from IMDb in the back. Figure out what percentage of the people are actually viewing, how much is viewership related to your ratings. If it is a good proxy to look at, okay, by the users on my platform, they are explicitly looking at some rating externally and then view the content. It should reflect in their viewing behavior as well. So if I'm able to hypothesize that and look at the quantum of the users which are looking at it, it's a great way to
the assignment
user behavior. And what percent of the user behavior are actually doing it?
Right. But Gaurav, you're talking from Netflix's perspective, right? Which is it taking pride in their recommendation system, right?
No. So I'm not taking Netflix point of view. I'm trying to understand the user's behavior.
Okay.
The hypothesis that we started with is saying that user goes ahead, looks externally,
Right.
wants some rating, then they come back,
Right.
and then they do reduce the time to value.
Right. Absolutely.
Correct? And this is a metric which you all are trying to optimize for.
Right.
IMDb coming into the picture should be able to surface good amount, legit and high quality content. And this is the proxy. The proxy for that is IMDb rating. This
Correct.
will reduce the cognitive load and the time required to play.
Correct. Correct.
And the completion rate of those content will also increase
Absolutely.
significantly.
Right.
In turn, leading into your retention piece as well.
Right.
More engage the user.
So the three metrics that I think we are trying to optimize for as a Netflix PM would be, one is time to value,
Correct.
because if people find content quickly, the probability of bouncing off reduces.
Right.
Second is we are also trying to complete the loop within the app, right? So there was a possibility if people are going to look at the IMDb, they might just bounce off and do something entirely else, right?
Sorry.
Yeah. So I think we can reduce the bounce off rates, and as you mentioned, I think it will also lead into better retention if community rating is a good proxy of how I am going to feel. Right? We'll come at the shortcomings of community ratings, as you mentioned, which might lead to polarization of the content being consumed, etc. But I think these are the three metrics that can be solved, Gaurav. What do you think are the needs of users, maybe Netflix and also content production house? Can we go in that direction?
Correct. Remember the last point you mentioned about the bounce off rate, right? I'm just curious to understand people who have started how to define bounce off rate. There's a content and they do not complete it because it can happen that they browse on the recommendation that has been surfaced to them using recommendations Netflix. They're engaged on the platform. They did not. So the viewing time or the abandon rate of the content is higher.
So we are focusing on search to play duration, and we are talking about bounce rate in that context.
So Netflix has a search homepage, right?
Correct.
On which the recommendations are being surfaced, and the recommendations are on the basis of the user's consumption.
Correct.
And on the basis of what is popular. Most likely, these are the three threads. Can be nuances to each of those genre that you.
Right.
I start viewing a content. I engage with it. Engage enough. Right. Movie. I just only watch for 10 minutes. There is an engagement.
Correct.
But I bounce off. What different content?
So I think this is also a bounce rate that might count, right? Or we can talk about the content abandonment rate. Would that be a better metric to sort of frame this?
I think that would be an interesting metric
to
look at.
I think that's also one thing. If we do decide to go ahead with such a feature, Netflix PMs can look at it.
Correct.
Right. But coming back to the problem, Gaurav, you were sharing your thoughts on, we were just framing these metrics that will get impacted.
Hmm.
Right.
So these were the metrics that we kind of can is
The bounce rates,
the content abandonment rate.
and then there is the retention piece.
There's a retention.
Retention is out.
Correct. Be
Right.
retained on the platform.
Right.
Correct. Now, the things that you're trying to kind of figure out, how
Correct.
would IMDb rate
Yeah.
the time to value?
Right.
Though there is a certain cohort of user whose behavior is they watch IMDb rate the start,
Right.
and then they come and search for a specific content and they start consuming it. Either they like it or don't like it. Right? Because IMDb, the rating in itself, is a mixture of viewpoints of so many individuals who have a different viewing taste, belong to a different region.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors which help me determine the IMDb rating.
Right.
It can be promoted by a particular content house, production house, which aim to push the IMDb rating over and above the control that it will go ahead and affect my experience.
Right. So essentially, what you're saying is, IMDb ratings might be specific to a region and or a set of cohort, which may not be applicable to me. So it's like a blanket rating given by.
It might be biased.
Okay.
As skewed.
Bias in what sense?
Bias in terms of geography, bias in terms of the user who are rating it,
Right.
their viewing experience, the appreciation of the particular art form on which they are looking at it, right? Art is subjective in nature.
Understood.
So what you like might not be relevant to what I like.
Right. So Gaurav, if let's say if can that problem be solved by a temporally and spatially contextual rating, which is it shows me rating. So the rating is not just a plain weighted average of the ratings, which it now is, right? It's a plain weighted average. Can we do a temporal average wherein the ratings have a higher weightage nearer to today? So it makes it temporally more attractive, and similarly spatially, or even from a user lens, right? People similar to me have rated it, so it's slightly higher indexed on my preferences or users like me. So we have
Correct.
geographical and sort of spatial and temporal contextuality built into the averages, and this may not be IMDb, but it might be internally sourced, right? What do you think?
So, Vaibhav, that's a brilliant point actually. The point, it is not limited to IMDb ratings.
Yeah.
And this is being guided by internally Netflix itself or any other third party rating, where I'm able to kind of segregate the rating engine itself in terms of the dimension that you just elaborated.
Right.
As Netflix or as any platform would have that ability to kind of dissect the ratings on the basis of what is relevant for my audience that I'm willing to consume.
Interesting. So if I, as Netflix, I am able to disclose the ratings, right? The reviews, something like what Google does. It shows you the split of how many people gave 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 stars, and you can filter the ratings. And if I can share my screen here, I think I'll be able to show you how Amazon also does it. So Amazon tags their ratings as to where people are saying it's not a good fit, the color is different, tags these reviews, and people can either filter out different reviews based on the rating they've given or the tagging that is done by Amazon. So I think that would also be a great way to see
Yes.
what people are exactly saying.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way of dissecting the ratings actually. Until it is not a standard scale on.
So I'll just maybe present how Amazon does it beautifully, right? Yeah. So you can see Amazon does two things. One is in the discovery section, it just shows the number of the equally weighted average of the ratings and how many people have rated it, right? But if you double click on the listing, it will give you an AI generated summary of what people have said. And it also tags these ratings and gives you upfront. It sort of indexes these. So now you can click and then individually go and study about what people have said. And it also puts images, right? So Amazon, it looks like Amazon has in some way taken a stab at this, right?
Right. So as long as you're able to dissect the elements of your rating system,
Yeah.
and it is consumable to serving the owner and not getting biased.
Any other problems, Gaurav, you foresee? One angle I wanted to bring to the discussion is as Netflix is producing more and more content with Netflix original coming in, I think there is a inherent conflict of interest, right? Wherein I as a user, I don't want to be biased towards Netflix show, and Netflix has an inherent interest in surfacing their own content, right? So I want to bring a community rating, and which is what Amazon also does, right?
So what we're talking from a user perspective, the
Right.
metric we're trying to solve, what time to value.
Right.
Now, Netflix as a different persona, when they are able to use IMDb rating, what will be the incentive, or why should they be discouraged?
So no,
Why would they not do it?
I'm still talking from a user's perspective, right, Gaurav? Because I inherently, as a user, don't trust Netflix's recommendation algorithm. Because I know more and more Netflix originals are coming, and Netflix has an inherent bias promoting their own content over other content.
Would you not think whatever ratings Netflix provide,
Right.
you are able to give it a feedback?
Yeah. So if there was a community rating which is exposed to users, which Netflix does not do currently, we can just quickly check how Netflix has their own rating system, which it doesn't surface to the users as much, but it just gives you glimpses.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
You like it, you don't like it, you love it.
Correct. So I've just taken some screenshots. I'll just show you how Netflix is currently doing. And that will help us contextualize, right? Netflix just gives you three options: thumbs up, thumbs down, and I love it, right? Which is like a double indicator. But I think this comes more from the point of view of training the recommendation system than surfacing it. But it also rarely does these things, right? It shows you Emmy nominated shows. So that is tagging, which is not really community led, but again, lends some credibility. And Netflix also shows you shows that are most liked. So there is community ratings, which is not a 0 to 5 rating, but in very, very few shows, it does surface this ratings. And Netflix has other tags such as new episode, watch now, or leaving soon, trying to solve the same problem of user discovery or trying to prompt the user in some direction. What do you think?
So, Prabhu, let me give you a scenario, okay? You got a rating on a particular show which says 73%.
Right.
Would that shape up your decision? Would you consider watching it? Would you consider not watching it?
Yeah, it's a relative decision, right? It's an interesting question. If I see everything is 70, I think that won't be a great proposition. But if I'm seeing spikes somewhere, it might pique my curiosity and I might want to start looking at it.
So now what will happen is you will go to a search filter,
right,
apply for rating filter, apply for ratings which in 70 and above or whatever those levels have been defined, and then you will start looking at this content. It will again lead to another set of decision that you have to take. It happens, the one of the content that you watched earlier surfaced on a 9-star rating and you did not like it. Now your trust on the rating system itself will go for a toss. Rather than me just giving it, most people liked it. Right? Combination that you mentioned, these of this movie are nominated. These are not influenced by people who are falling into my lookalike, correct? But have a different preference. And the lookalikes you define on the basis of your behavior, your watching behavior, right? So any element which is getting painted by user in terms of rating, they have a scale of say 0 or 1 or just infinite. Either it is 0, 1 or you...
Interesting point. But this rating system is present across all marketplaces. You could have the same argument on Amazon also. You have
That's an interesting point. Let us deconstruct that.
Yeah.
Why does Amazon believe that there is a rating of a different level, right? One is that there is a fulfillment which is happening offline.
Right.
This platform is just helping you discover.
Right.
It is important to one segregate the quality of fulfillment that has happened and the experience that you had while purchasing. When you map it to a Netflix experience, the discovery and development of the piece happens on the platform. Right? There's a lot of control that Netflix has inherently. Amazon, which does not have control on the quality of the product, a limited control on the delivery experience, the tag being promised, the return rate.
Right.
Hence, these are beyond what Amazon is producing or controlling, and it is being shipped from Amazon. Again, hence the dissections become really important for me to take a decision of its purchase behavior every time. Probably since the stakes are very high, right? If the damage has occurred to the product previously, or the particular product has been returned high frequently, you would have observed it.
That is super interesting.
Like, this is because it is helping me decision making.
Right. So, Gaurav, that's I think interesting point that you brought in, right? Wherein Amazon is trying to decouple between the discovery element where Amazon is there and the other piece is the item itself, right? And it wants to segment level ratings, which Amazon does. So Amazon and also Airbnb, people can rate their experiences based on the cleanliness, based
Correct.
on how spacious the stay was, right? But at the end, it's all about the quality of the experience that the person is getting. On one place, I'm spending with money, which is on Amazon or Airbnb. On the other place, Netflix, I'm spending my time, right? But the inherent need for a community rating as a proxy of quality is still there. In Amazon, I feel like I'm wasting time if I go down the low quality path. On Netflix, I feel like it's a waste of time if I go down the low quality content consumption piece.
Hmm.
So at the end, it's
Interesting.
still a proxy for quality. At the
It
end,
is definitely a proxy for the quality in terms of your product fulfillment
yeah,
versus your time which you're spending on watching the content.
right.
For rating comparison for Amazon versus Netflix, both the amount of control the platform has and which is
Interesting.
helping you shape your decision.
Hmm.
You're right that there's a loss of time, which
Correct.
Amazon, which is a metric which you are trying to solve, the time to
Yeah,
value.
time to value.
Now, with IMDb coming into the play, now what we have to look at is it really solving the problem?
Hmm.
Not the proxy data to look at is what hinting from the beginning when I mentioned initially. Let us identify the people who are actually watching high rated IMDb content. I have my
Right.
entire database. I can get the IMDb rating. I can actually find the cohort of users
Right.
who actually prefer IMDb rating.
Right. Understood.
So this can more be like an opt-in
Understood.
rather than for all.
Understood. Very, very interesting. So you want to make it like a cohort based feature, right? Which is an opt in for few users rather than everyone. But got up to the larger point, right? Wherein any sort of community rating, let's assume IMDb is not there, right? Should
Hmm.
Netflix build its own community rating system? And we can double click on how different platforms have done it, right? And maybe that will give you a good segue into this discussion. What do you think?
So is a rating system for Netflix, just not exposed to the user.
Correct. So it's inbuilt into the recommendation
So the
system.
of the rating system is to help you identify.
Correct.
You
Correct.
would go through the entire catalog of the content and identify see what are the criteria that you have
Right.
and then see what is relevant for
Correct.
you
Correct.
on
Correct.
the basis of community rating.
Right.
The dimensions of those rating is more.
Hmm.
I'm more interested to understand what are your
Yep.
thought process.
Sure.
That is something which currently Netflix is not able to deploy, and we want
So that's an interesting point wherein you're saying that Netflix does not even want you to take
spend
that
time.
burden. It inherently wants to bake it into its recommendation system and not let the user be bothered by it.
Correct.
That's the point. I think that's interesting, but still, despite of the recommendation system having so much data on me, on everyone else, it's like the largest streaming platform, I think, after YouTube. Still, people are hopping, and only data can show how many people are doing it. But inherently, I think there is still a need, right? YouTube also, by the way, has its own recommendation system. Yet it is coupling that recommendation system with a democratized community rating. Right? So similar market where it's video streaming. One is user generated and one is non-user generated content.
So that was again back to the point that how much control does the platform has on what content is being surfaced. Correct. So YouTube has taken a middle path where there are policies and governance around what content is allowed. Users and creators and they're free to upload. What now? YouTube has an external validation that whatever has been uploaded, I'm not sure about the quality of it. So I will give the right to the user.
Oh.
Wherein Netflix has the control on the
Oh.
quality of content being shown.
Hmm.
Because
Very
these are big
interesting.
production houses
Very interesting.
where I'm not concerned about what is the quality of the video being recorded, what is the story behind it. I'm able to do a research somewhere else. But YouTube, but Netflix has taken that burden off you of doing the research. So the
So Gaurav, what you're talking about is production quality, right? Not the quality of the content per se.
both.
So yes, so but Netflix also has this. It has these 3 IMDb rated contents as well, pieces which users have absolutely hated, right? And which users absolutely vote by their consumption time, right?
Correct.
So even if you're talking about a screening at the level of even surfacing this content or even getting this content on the platform, which Netflix does inherently, right? You're saying YouTube is not able to do it. So YouTube is just leaving that decision to its users to take based on community rating as a crutch, is what you're saying, right?
Right.
Super interesting.
Even if the 3-star rated IMDb rated content on Netflix, If the viewership is low, Netflix recommendation would fall unless the business arrangements between the production house and Netflix has promises being made to meet the commercial commitment for a particular time, particular viewership on the basis of the contract which is there.
Which is again, let's
It's
us
a
back to
Netflix,
the
it's a
conflict of
Netflix
interest.
problem. It's a Netflix problem,
Correct.
not problem.
Correct. Correct. Because again, I think users are going back and forth to IMDb to look at these ratings.
Correct. It is in Netflix interest to ensure
Yep.
that these content which are have enough viewership, they should be pushed down in the recommendation engine. One, to ensure that the time to value is realized faster. The abandonment rate. Correct. Ensuring that if the users are engaged, the reach increases. I can
Right.
understand because of the sheer content coverage. Cohort segments would love it and surviving there.
So it sits in the Netflix repository and people with high intent can view that content.
Correct.
But a recommendation system will not surface that content.
This is how Amazon does it, right?
Yeah.
As I think you did mention that only 20% of the Amazon's SKU actually drives 80% of this. Similar is the case for Netflix because of the coverage. They
But Gaurav, let's say Netflix is surfacing all this great content to me, as what you're saying, right? Because Netflix is inherently doing that filtration. One is low quality production, it will not accept even in its repository, right? And even within the high quality production, it is only surfacing things that are super interesting for me, which is inherently baked into the recommendation system. But let's say I have this bunch of options coming at me in through the recommendation system, still I am unable to make that choice as to what to watch. And at that time, as a user, I feel the need of a community rated. But because how do I decide between, let's say, the 25, 30 options that Netflix has given to me?
fair point actually. So let us take a proxy of it.
Yeah.
In India, we have Swiggy and Zomato.
Yeah.
There are particular dish being rated, outlets being rated as well.
Right.
They've actually broken the fabric into different elements. Who rated it? What was the rating? What was the rating about? Correct. On the basis of the experience at the restaurant or the service that they received, on the quality of the food being served. Correct. Now you as an individual saw that rating.
Hmm.
You went ahead. You go, and then the experience that you had was contrarian.
Okay.
So what you did, your experience established for you that maybe there are two possibilities.
Yeah.
Yes, it might give it another shot.
Yeah.
Correct. The other way around. Okay, I will go by whatever my friends say, which became one of the input of how Zomato right now let you view those restaurants, right? My friends also order from this.
Right.
Who are those more friends?
So that is what we were talking about, which
Correct.
is spatially contextualized ratings, which is for
Correct.
you. That also is an interesting way of implementing the
Correct.
rating mechanic in your app. But what you're saying, Gaurav, is let's say I trust on the rating and my experience is not in coherence with how people have rated. And that leads to a degradation in the trust in the rating system in general.
Correct.
But this is not just a Netflix problem. It's a universal problem existing in all marketplaces. And people, again, rate. If it's not a good experience, people do rate. All right. But is it really eroding the trust in the rating system? But I can see the same argument on the recommendation system also. Let's say your recommendation system has recommended something to me. It's not prioritizing things for me. It's just throwing 30 content pieces
Correct.
on my face. After I click on what you've recommended, even if it is stacked based on priority and I don't like it, the same problem will be there in the recommendation system as well, wherein my trust in the recommendation system will sort of degrade. So the problem of trust in the system getting degraded by terrible experience is still not solved by the recommendation system or this as well, right?
Valid argument actually, Vaibhav. I think I would take it. I think what is more curious for my understanding is let us say there is a community rating. I'm interested to understand what does it comprises of. Community rating itself can be influenced by people whose preferences of watching content I do not really trust.
Yeah.
Correct. That was the trust I was trying to bridge and gap, right? Now, what can happen, I can choose who are those community members and whose recommendation do I really appreciate. And if I'm able to deconstruct that community rating, and I have also the capability to kind of calibrate the constituent of the community,
Right.
that would be a super interesting way to look at.
That's awesome. Again, we are back to, I think, we keep circling back to the contextual rating, which is similar, like which can be temporal and contextual as well. Temporal, I think I'm bringing it back because let's say there's a 1995 movie which was launched in 1995 and it's highly rated, but it might so be relevant in those times.
Correct.
Right? And if I watch it now, similar thing is true for, let's say, clothing as well, right? Let's say some people have highly rated a particular type of clothes. It might be relevant in, let's say, 3 years or for boomers like us, but it might not be relevant for Gen Zs, right? So I think there is an inherent issue with rating systems being these blanket rating system wherein it's just a weighted average of everyone that has rated it, right? So I think we keep circling back to this problem of the ratings being super contextual in time as well as in terms of people whose ratings I want to create this weighted average of. So I think we both agree that there should be a rating system before we take a stab at looking at how other people have designed it and also trying to see how we can design something for Netflix.
Yeah, as long as there's a configurability around your rating system.
Yeah. Cool. So let's take a view at how other people have done it, different apps, and it's super interesting. Different people have tried to solve the credibility problems of the people who are rating as well. And I'll just show it to you across different platforms, right? Netflix, as I already showed you, right? It inherently has these Emmy nominees, which I also feel is community ratings, where the community is very, very restricted. Where I am saying that the people who can vote are, let's say, movie critics or something like that. I'm trying to look at Yelp here, right? In the listing page, it is just showing me simply weighted average along with the rating and the number of reviews here. But if I double click on it, wherein I'm going in the particular listing, then it shows me these review highlights wherein people are talking about this pizza and you were talking about different elements of the rating, right? So Yelp has solved it beautifully, I think, which is similar to how Amazon has done it, which is indexation of these reviews. Crispy is one theme. The BBQ chicken pizza is one thing. And it also shows how many ratings or how many reviews this theme is coming across as.
I think they've picked out the element of the product which is being in context, right? What are those attributes? How do you describe a pizza?
Right.
And wherever it has been mentioned, those have been picked out. Beautiful.
Yeah. So I think, Gaurav, a better term you suggested is attribute-based ranking or attribute-based review classification.
Correct.
Also.
Correct.
Yeah. So again, Yelp is solving your problem wherein, Gaurav, you can sort this filter by rating and also search reviews. So I can search and it is also solving the credibility problem. You can see by tagging the people who are giving these recommendations. Can you see this? Yes. Wherein this person is like an all-star or an elite 25, or this guy, the number of reviews this guy has given, right?
Correct.
And what's beautiful here is people are also reacting on it. So if I'm seeing, let's say, 100 reviews, I can quickly scan through reviews and get to know if it's helpful, love it, oh no. Like, I think it's just beautifully done by you.
Correct. I think I remember this even Google has this. We have voted for a particular place or outlet. As a user, how much helpful did you find it? Helpful.
Right.
Thanks for it. And no.
What do you think of this? Wherein the user ratings are there, the user reviews are there, plus ratings and user credibility, and then people's reaction to it. All of this brings, I think, more credibility to the review given by a particular user. Does it solve your problem somehow?
It does. I think these are the constituent of your community rating.
Yeah. And it also helps me filter through these reviews as well, which is more interesting.
Correct.
So it'll help me find which reviews are good. And also Amazon, as we talked about, right? So it's also giving you real life images of how these items are appearing after delivery or in normal conditions. Whereas before in the listing, it's all photographed in studios.
It makes sense for Amazon. Fulfillment is happening beyond their control. And they would like the user to know the next user is going to purchase, how the experience is going to be.
Right. So let's take a look at the travel tourism industry, right? See how Airbnb is doing it. So it is tagging on the listing page, on the search page or listing page, right? And then if you double
validation provided by guest.
Yeah.
Correct.
And it again is going to the attribute based reviews, wherein you can review by attributes. And also an interesting thing that they do is host based rating. So it's not just on the level of the accommodation, but also on the level of the host. So Superhost is also a proxy of good quality. So I think all of these are proxies of good quality in different dimensions. Correct. As you talked about.
This is mostly like the value chain, right? Entire process.
Hmm.
When you book, you interact with the host, so their
Yeah.
experience matters. When
Yeah.
you go, you discover about the place, and then
Hmm.
you experience the entry itself has so many attributes and the dimension that you have mentioned. So
Yeah.
each of those things are helping you in taking a decision.
Right.
And if rating I provided at each of those level, it is going to be super helpful for me to reduce the time to provide value.
Right. So interesting it is, it's also surfacing the response rate of the host and in the tat in which they respond, which is super
Correct.
critical for a guest, right? And
Correct.
another behavior that this is also sort of formulating is creating discipline amongst the host, right? To respond very, very quickly.
Right. So they are also accountable.
Yeah. In Coursera, it's just doing this very, very plain vanilla rating, which is the simple average and the
Correct.
number of
This
reviews.
this is exactly what my concern is. People who took this particular course, what their current education level was,
Correct. Correct.
what
Yeah.
if they were able to relate to it.
Yeah.
Just look at it, it's like immunology, something related to biology, right? And someone have a background which is not relevant to this, and they had this experience, they would
Hmm.
rate it bad.
Right. Right. That's interesting. So even if you check on booking.com, so it shows the rating, the number of views, and it's also tagging them as excellent or good based on the rating. So it helps contextualize the ratings, right? You said 70% people love it. And what does that mean? So booking is even taking that burden of you to understand what the rating means. And it is also doing the attribute level rating. And you can also search based on these attributes, right? One interesting thing done by Agoda is hotels are also rating their own listings, and it is
That,
surfacing that as well. YouTube is doing it very simply by number of views, and if you double click, it's also giving you a comment section, which also can be an interesting discussion whether Netflix can have a comment section or not.
love it. Actually, we should certainly have that conversation as well.
Yeah. And one of my favorites is Reddit. So it shows the number of upvotes, the number of comments, etc. And one small thing is here you can see again it's increasing the credibility of the person who's commenting.
Correct. Example that you showed for Yelp, right? Which had many options to react with it.
Yeah.
It can go both ways. People who are so much passionate about food
Yeah.
and they really want has been voted by someone who is a strong individual in that particular in that space and is an expert. And
Right.
in a platform like Reddit, which is mostly a question answer, they are limited it. Either you like the response or you do not like it.
Right. Oh, interesting. Interesting. I think that should bring up a whole new discussion of thumbs up, thumbs down rating versus like different mechanics of ratings. Is it just thumbs up, thumbs down, or
Correct.
is it a slider, or 0 to 10 rating, or is it
Basically, binary versus a spectrum.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, brilliantly put, I think. Yeah. So coming back to our discussion, what do you think constitutes our rating system for Netflix? So I think we are both on similar grounds when it comes to not showing IMDb, but it should be something which is inherent to Netflix and voted by the community of Netflix people. Does that make sense? Or do you want to have a third party outsider, Rotten Tomatoes, let's say?
Hmm. No, certainly no one likes Rotten Tomatoes. So IMDb rating, if it has to be there,
Yeah.
it needs to be an opt-in to opt-in out.
Mhm.
A good way to really estimate or prioritize this particular feature is to look at the viewing pattern of the users of particular cohort who have, without even looking at the IMDb rating, have always watched high-rated IMDb content.
Mm.
And we only started them as an NTP or a hypothesis to begin with. These are the user in their usual self. Go check.
Mm.
If they do not opt in, then who else would?
So Gaurav, you're trying to establish an experiment with users.
Correct.
And how do you classify these users?
So at the current content consumption pattern, I would be able to identify basis time information that I would be able to receive from that particular which content has been rated at a different scale, map it the user pattern, find the cohort of users who exhibit, who have, say, for 50% or 60% of the content that they consumed, have usually been IMDb 7.5 plus.
Okay, so 7.5 is an artificial number that we introduced, right?
Yes. Yes.
So Gaurav, how would you, let's say you're trying to apply these filters, right? I've given you a dump of Excel of all Netflix users and all the possible data I as Netflix have. What filters would you apply to filter out the set of users who you want to experiment on? So the sort of user segmentation that we came across was purely behavioral and it had nothing to do with geography.
Correct.
So do you want to take a split on that basis, or you want to pick out the users who are on an average watching content that is highly IMDb rated? Would that be a better way of segmenting the users?
I think as a part of experiment, I will probably start with an average
Okay.
where people across geographies, across age spectrum, I'm able to find out they have for X amount of content that they consume, Y percentage have always been above IMDb threshold of what.
Okay. Interesting. Or
This-
Gaurav, a better way of doing the same thing which you're suggesting is the average IMDb rating of all the content you've consumed. If I track rank users based on that, right? So average, so let's say I've consumed 10 shows, right? 5 of them are 9 IMDb, 4 of them are 8. So I do an average of all the IMDb ratings that, of all the shows, the IMDb ratings of all the shows I've consumed and you have consumed. And I stack rank users based on the IMDb rating, an average of IMDb rating of the content they've consumed. Would that
this
be
is-
a better?
This is interesting, provided we align on the metric that we are trying to solve. Correct. Mechanics of the experiment.
Okay, so let's double click on the user base we are trying to optimize for. Then we'll design the experiment. It need not be IMDb rating at all. Again, I think we've chosen more in terms of community rating and some sort of contextualized rating in terms of users or whatever, what have you, right? Spatial, temporally contextualized.
Got
ratings.
it. So there is a rating mechanism which
Yeah.
is residing within Netflix.
Perfect.
It can be powered by external. It can be powered by your internal viewing pattern. It can be a combination of both. Or
Yeah.
for that, I think the approach that you suggested makes much more sense. Wherein I figure out people, as you mentioned, right, the stack rank of the content that have consumed, how much rating did they have, and then start surfacing those. I'm just curious to understand if the control would the control still be with the user to change shit, or if you're just again recommending.
I don't buy in the philosophy of opt-in here, right? Let's say I'm doing this experiment on 2 sets of sort of users, and I have a control group in this IMDb highly rated, let's say top decile of these users, stacked ranked by the average IMDb ratings that they've consumed. I'm assuming that these users are probably going to IMDb, right? That's my proxy, and I can have a control group of users who I don't surface this for, and the other group, which is my experiment group, I'm showing the content for and the rating for. It's not an opt-in. It's just there. Why should it be an opt-in?
So my hypothesis was on the premise that people who are exhibiting this behavior of watching a rating, external rating based content, if they are the folks who are ready to opt in and then start consuming, and this increases that decreases their time to value and decreases their abandonment rate. These would be the right set of cohorts who will help me understand that any rating of sort is helping them take their decision faster.
So I think opt-in is a mechanism for you to filter out users who really want this, right? And then you decide whether on based of the
Everyone
outcome
does
matters.
not look at any rating in order to consume content.
Correct.
Correct. Every time want a particular product on Amazon and there's the only supplier, you will still go ahead and use it. You have that need.
Right.
Similarly, if I have this community-based filter being
Right.
applied for everyone, it will again increase the decision fatigue.
So you want users to opt in. Let's say you surface this opt in to 100 users, and let's say only 25% people opt in. It shows me demand for a particular feature.
I identify which cohort of the user are actually in.
So which we've done already, right? By the stack
Correct.
ranking of the average IMDb consumed. And within that user also, you're saying, I will give an opt-in, which will also help gauge demand in a preliminary way. If for this set of users, the time is reducing, the time to value, the content completion rate and reduction in bounce off rates, then it will make sense.
Correct.
That's the sort of outcome we are trying to expect, right? Very, very interesting.
How would
Now-
you do it differently?
I was just trying to think whether opt-in mechanism was really a good way. Opt-in mechanism shows me if there is a demand for the product or not. Right? If I just overlay it for everyone, let's say I don't want to do a cohort-based feature. I want to sort of do a blanket feature for everyone. So in your experiment, we are only able to gauge for people who are trusting on some sort of rating, who are doing this. But if I want to do it for everyone on Netflix,
How would you check this as in how do you run this as an experiment to figure that out whether people have already have a taste that resonates very well with what IMDb rating has, rating for that matter.
yeah,
So that is what you're trying to do, people rating. But
Yeah.
the taste that they have of particular
Yeah.
art form
yeah,
in content consumption resonates very well with the high quality content. Correct?
yeah.
You are ensuring that these people are also being kind
Yeah,
of looped.
I don't want to make it cohort-based feature, but I want to make it for everyone, and that will also help.
How would you experiment?
Interesting. So again, we stack rank it by the IMDb consume.
So there
I
is
think
a-
that's where it feels.
There is a value that you need to provide to the business, which is Netflix in this case, a
Right.
value to our producers, a value to the user. Finding and every feature would not provide value to every user. So I'm just curious to understand in the approach,
Yeah,
what experiment construct would it have in order to prove the hypothesis that this is providing value to all the three personas?
interesting. So if we remove the opt-in mechanism, then we'll be able to look at a broader set. But if we do an opt-in, then we'll only be able to see whether it is improving the metrics for the users who are displaying this IMDb behavior. In the experiment that I'm recommending, you can do it for everyone. And then based on that, maybe we'll be able to decide whether to make it an opt-in feature or not. Does that make sense?
So when you design that experiment, you define the control group and the treatment group, right?
Correct. Correct.
Within qualify for a treatment group.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of a randomized experiment, like a
no.
randomly sampled.
So
group
what
of
will
people.
happen in that approach you find?
Yeah.
And you would have a strong hypothesis that you want to test. The sample in that treatment group would not be a representation of the experiment that you want to run or validate. The exhibit outside of Netflix of watching a rating
Hmm.
of some sort. And then that translates into your viewing experience. Your time to value is being reduced.
Right. Curious
So-
to know your thoughts.
So probably the sample set is to reduce the cohort of user who actually are exhibiting a resonance with high IMDb based consumption to begin with, or one of the mechanisms that we have. That cohort, the approach that you suggested of having two groups of control and treatment
Hmm.
and then run with it. Because these are the set of people who have a lot,
Homogeneity.
yeah, to ensure that their watching behavior is very well resonated. Correct. Now you
Yeah.
put them into control and treatment. If
That
now
makes
if their experience of reduction in time to value, reduction in the abandonment rate is significant, that's
Yeah.
a good proxy for you.
Awesome. That's actually useful. Hmm. So we've agreed upon an inbuilt Netflix recommendation system, right? Wherein the recommendations are not a simple average, it's a weighted average, weighted in time, space, and the user persona matching, which more and more brings us closer to the recommendation system, which is again an AI doing it inherently. And we've also designed a very cool experiment around it, right? Gaurav, do you want to add anything before we conclude? I think this was an amazing session.
It's curious to understand that the rating and the recommendation engine, which looks very standard vanilla to an individual is looking at the platform, but it translates so beautifully and differently when you look at the nuances
Yeah.
of the same mechanics being
Absolutely.
applied product in different domains, right? What you explained for Amazon, why does it make sense? And how would it be different for Netflix? Why do we have a spectrum
Yeah.
and Reddit has only a binary option? So I think this was very enriching conversation that we had, and I'm happy to hear more what people have to say.
So with that, we wrap up today's session.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.